Okay. Well, thank you all very much for today for coming here to the History Center for our second panel on local community journalism that we're holding in conjunction with our main exhibit on the past and uncertain future of local print journalism. And today we have one organization that does print, and the other two are more geared toward other types of delivery systems. We have, and we also have a very diverse set of organizations. We have one, the Limestone Post, represented here, that's a private nonprofit. We have the Ryder, which is still is advertiser supported, and we have WFIU TIU, which is a public media institutional organization. And for each of them, let me get make sure that I don't get things wrong. Here we go. Our panelists today, from my right, far right, is Pat Beane, Senior News Editor at WTIU FIU. Prior to that, he worked for the Herald Times for 30 years, the last 10 or so as sports editor. And part of his responsibilities include producing Indiana News Desk, a weekly TV news program on WTIU. And we, Becky Hill in the middle represents the Limestone Post. She's president of the Limestone Media Board of Directors, one of 11 nonprofit boards on which she has served in various capacities. She has helped to found 4 boards: Executive Women in Healthcare, the Indiana Medical Directors Association, the Irvington Guild of Artists, and the Zionsville Arts Initiative. Besides the Limestone Media Board, she also serves on the board of the League of Women Voters, Bloomington, Monroe County. She's been a freelance writer for 15 years, writing about education, science, education, health, and other topics. And she also is a contributor to the Limestone Post magazine, writing about health and science. And then to my right is Penn Jensen, a contributing editor of the Ryder. His background as a writer spans 5 decades, starting with Earth Times, an environmental spinoff from Rolling Stone, which he continued with his own publication, Clear Creek. He has credits on 2 motion pictures, Radon and Tebby and The Eyes of Laura Mars. His past publishing experience includes Black Lizard Books, which was sold to Random House and Compass American Guides. He has his own company, Pen and Ink, whose clients have included the BBC, PBS, and KQED-TV, which is a San Francisco NPR station. And his most recent work is publishing Charlotte Zitlow's 1971 How We Won, the Campaign for a Better Way. He recently retired as a man of many tastes, because he recently retired as founding executive director of the American Craft Distilling Association, a trade association now based in Washington, D.C. And as a journalist, I've partaken of a lot of distilled spirits, but I never made any.
I've never heard that about journalism.
Oh, no.
The biggest consumers, right?
What would we do without them?
Really? since we have kind of a diverse set of organizations here, I wanted to try to work up a definition of journalism so we all had some common ground of what we're kind of exploring today. And I found this, I'll be honest, I found it on Wikipedia, but I liked it, so I stole it. And that is that journalism is the production and distribution of reports about the interaction of events, facts, idea, and people that inform society to some degree of accuracy.
I like that last part.
Yeah. Well, you had to almost have that. And I emailed all these guys before in preparing for this panel, and I wanted to start a question with Penn. In your email to me, you said that the writer practices reflective journalism.
That's what I call it.
Yeah, I wonder if you could elaborate on that and explain what you mean by that.
Well, the Ryder comes out, it's essentially a monthly magazine. Not exactly, it has doubles issues and so on. But because of that, the lead time is long. And we had, in general, from an editorial point of view, we draw from the community as it responds to the world, not necessarily a specific event in Bloomington, but anything and everything that has a sensible quality to it that somebody can write about, photograph about, or whatever, with some skill and talent, and we support that. And so I call it reflective rather than reporting, because we're just not on the scene. We're cold media in that sense, as opposed to hot media, and if people understand that distinction. It's a McLuhan distinction, sociologically speaking. Journalism, which is important because it leads, I think, to something coming up later about hot media and social media and on the internet. But so we basically are kind of a literary, artistic, society, social media in the sense of commenting on it. That's what I mean by reflective.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. And maybe we could build on that with Becky and Pat kind of taking a look at, kind of what you see the role or function of your media outlet in the community. And Pat, or especially in the current media landscape that affects Wilmington. And Pat, you got the mic, so why don't you go ahead?
Yeah, I think what we are is kind of more of what you would think of as traditional journalism, where we provide daily news coverage of the community and the area. We also do, trying to make sense of stories and explaining to people what's going on in the community. We also like the reflective thing, with Indiana News Desk and some of the longer form stories we do. We are kind of reflecting on what's going on in the community and it's giving more, depth to some of the stories that we do. But like I said, we are kind of more of traditional journalism every day with providing 30, 45 minutes of news on the radio and also some TV updates during the day.
Yeah. Well, Pat, as someone that came from a print operation, could you compare and contrast as far as what you do as a news editor every day? Is it about the same?
Yeah, there wasn't really a whole lot of change. When I was interviewing for the job, I was basically saying, journalism is journalism. We're just doing it in a different format. We do it for the internet. We do it for the web. We do for radio, and we do for TV. Every story that we do, it generally has 3 different versions that we're pushing out. So.
Okay. And Becky, why don't you take that question about for the Limestone Post, and because I know that you're not a daily, or
No.
you're not even. It's kind of not a set publication schedule.
Yeah, we tend to, we're a digital magazine, we're a nonprofit digital magazine, and we tend to publish probably, I'd say on average, 1 to 2 stories. We try to do that 1 to 2 stories a week, and that's our goal too, is to keep that consistency. As a nonprofit, our mission's a little bit different. We became a nonprofit in 2019, and we joined the Institute of Nonprofit News in 2020. And by doing that, we're like any other nonprofit. We focus on mission and we focus on community service, which means that our journalism focuses what's happening in the community. We do long-form solutions journalism. Long-form means that we take more time with a story and try to provide multiple perspectives so that when people read it, they feel like they're getting more information than you might get in a typical, triangular journalism. And solutions journalism means that we also look at what's happening in other communities and what they're doing, what's been successful, and whether it can happen here, whether those solutions can be applied here. I write health and science, and so healthcare is always rather interesting because people are always trying new solutions in healthcare, and so we look at different options in different communities and see how it compares to here and if we could do it. So I hope that answers your question. Okay, good.
Well, to follow up, I found the story you guys published when you went nonprofit, and I think Ron Eid had written this, and he mentioned that that when the Limestone Post started in 2015,
right?
I think it was just a regular.
It was a for-profit entity then.
Yeah. And as he says, and as he writes here, that he found much support from local businesses that wanted to share their message with readers. And he could have taken thousands of dollars from companies who wanted him to do a story about them if he did a story about them the way they wanted.
Yeah.
So has that panned out where had you found that the nonprofit status does free you to be more independent?
I think it does. And I also, for me, as board president and as a writer there, focusing on what's happening in the community and community service journalism is really critical, I think. And especially since I write health and science. So I think that's really important. And it frees us from also, as a writer, I don't want to write about marketing or anything. I don't want to market a company or anything like that. I want to write about issues that impact the community. And so that's really critical. This year we did a deep dive series, which we did in collaboration with WFIU, and it's an investigative series. And we wrote an article on a particular issue. We've written on opioid settlement monies, the quality of water at Lake Monroe. We wrote on housing. And then WFHB did a series of radio spots and programs on those particular issues. And as a result, we were able to share quite extensively all different viewpoints and perspectives of a particular issue. And so I think that's what we're doing now, and as a board president, that's what I want to see us continue to do.
Now, all those kinds of things take resources.
Yeah.
Was there a grant supporting that?
Yeah, the Deep Dive series is supported by the Community Foundation, and that in itself is very unique. The nonprofit model for journalism is relatively new, and it's basically doubled in the last few years. But in local communities, you're finding that you're losing newspapers, and the community is really just not aware of what the impact is of losing local news and such. So anyway, gosh, I lost my train of thought. I'm sorry. Anyway, so I think that being public service journalism, you can share that, and you can share what news is more thoroughly. And not that anybody else isn't. Everybody here in Bloomington, we have several niche organizations, and everybody shares the kind of information that they need to share, and it's really important to our news community.
Yeah,
So.
and Stroke, we hear so much about news deserts.
Yeah.
And we're not a news desert by any means, just, by the presence of you here and the people that are going to be on our panel in December. So we're not bereft of news sources, but sometimes it's as a consumer, it can be a little difficult to find sometimes. So
I might disagree with you a little bit on that,
No.
because
please do.
I think that if you look at, you can look at Bloomington in isolation, and yes, we have a fragmented and multifaceted news community. But for local news, what we're seeing is we have a small newspaper owned by a corporate entity, Gannett, and they've been pretty explicit about what they're interested in. Gannett's interested in. They're interested in larger metropolitan newspapers and not local newspapers. And as a result, you're seeing local newspapers owned by Gannett just basically piecemealed to death. So now we have our Herald Times here. They're functioning with much less than 10 reporters, which is really difficult to do, to report on community news, to do that. And surrounding communities like Greene and Owen and Morgan, they've either closed their paper or they're a ghost paper. Morgan County, they've closed their paper, and they have somebody there that's interested in starting up another paper. But also in Ellettsville, we lost that paper, and now you have the Herald Times shrinking, which is really unfortunate. But I think that what we're seeing is that Bloomington is becoming part of that news desert that is growing around us. That because we do have news deserts around us.
Right.
So.
Penn, maybe you can address this. It occurs to me that when I was at the Herald Times for 15 years, arts and entertainment coverage was a big part of that. We had a couple of sections a week just devoted to what was happening. The work at the Ryder, do you see yourself filling a void there that was somewhat created by kind of the diminishing of the local print product?
That's a good question, and I have to answer it kind of personally because it's a long-standing process for the Ryder to support not only journalism, not only creative writing, but also film and music. So the film series is another income source for the Ryder. Not a lot, but it helps cover a few bills. And it's a long-standing tradition to bring in film from all over from every area that can be kind of accessed, and that is generally not available to the mainstream, certainly, and even on the internet in terms of a theatrical experience. And I think the experiential side of that is something that is interactive with the audience, interactive with our readers, and that's a very important element of what the Ryder does. And that's been doing that forever. In fact, the current issue is about kind of a whole guidebook to Lotus, which is a great theatrical music event that Bloomington is now famous for and has supported civically. Put money up, raise money, has its own building. It's a pretty neat deal, and we're in this kind of tiny international city. You have Jacobs School of Music. You've got some of the greatest minds working in many fields right across the street. And that expands into the community, and we're interested in that. And we are interested in science, and we're interested in think pieces, me personally, very much so. But we're open to kind of almost anything that comes with heart and it's well written from the community. So if somebody has something they want to write about, basically the writer's position is, well, let's try to fit it in. We don't edit in that regard. It's like saying, well, this isn't a story for us. If you think it's a story for you, then we think it's probably a story for the writer. It's the way we think.
Pat?
Yeah, I was gonna say, getting back to kind of the news desert, that's happening here with the loss of, not the loss of the HT, but really with the shrinking of it and the delay in publishing stories, so like meetings and stuff don't get in for the next couple days. And we've really tried to, at WFIU and WTIU, really try to fill that void, with Morning Edition, and All Things Considered in the afternoon, our 2 news radio programs, we can provide that daily coverage that, that the HT is not getting anymore. You're not getting in the HT anymore. We've got reporters at most government meetings, and and like I said, just try to really fill that void. And I think we've done that really well over the last couple of years.
One of the questions I had for you was, how many hours of local news programming would you say there are? Or either weekly basis or daily basis? You mentioned All Things Considered.
Right, Morning Edition.
Are there local inserts on that?
Right. So we're doing, I would say, 30 to 45 minutes of just news programming each day on the radio.
Okay.
And that's
these
a Morning
different
Edition
programs.
and All Things Considered. We do several little 2-minute every half hour, with fresh news. We've also got Noon Edition on Fridays, which Bob hosts. Is an hour-long radio program, focused on local news and issues. And on Thursday mornings on the radio, we have City Limits, which is a feature which we take questions from members of the community and try to answer them. And and that's generally a 4-minute piece. And we also we also have features that go into the show that are also radio versions that'll be 3- and 4-minute pieces. So we're doing a lot of local news, and that's not even bringing into account what WFIU does on their side, which with Earth Eats and some of the other programs that they do.
Right, and you're part of Indiana Public Media,
Right.
Which is what is that? The Indiana.
Yeah, WFYI.
Okay.
There's stations in Fort Wayne, Lafayette, South Bend, Muncie, and it's all part of the Indiana Public Broadcasting. And
So you
we'll pull their stories, they'll pull our stories.
Yeah.
Yep. So
Okay.
we're kind of pulling from the whole network. We're the biggest by far newsroom in that, and we kind of have the largest newsroom in the state. Yeah, for that.
How many people do you think? We were talking about that before we started. Full and part timers and students, and so you have a lot, right?
Yeah, we've probably got, I'm trying to think, 5 full-time reporters. That's not including me. And then we have 2 people that's in our newsroom that are paid by Indiana. They're part of the Indiana Public Broadcasting.
Right.
So they're not WTIU people. Then we've got 3 or 4 or 5 interns, and we have an education reporter who comes to us through a grant through Voice of America, Aubrey Wright, and we've got her for 2 years. So that's another full timer that's on.
Okay.
So it's a good sized newsroom.
Yeah, I was going to say you have probably easily the most resources available than anybody in town.
Yeah, we've definitely got more than what the Herald Time does now.
Yeah, and I'll ask. We can pass that over to Becky there, but I'll ask Penn first. Ryder is largely volunteer based.
Correct. We have no salaries, so nobody gets paid. You get paid by enjoying what you do and free tickets, and here and there the kind of comps you expect to receive. I got a free cup of coffee today from Michael at the Uptown, which is really hey, there it is. Which is a different model, and it's it creates its own issues. The sustainability of the Ryder is really based on the fact that it has just been here for quite a while. People expect it. It has a certain, I don't know what you want to call it. I want to say panache, but it's more like, well, it's a reputation for having some pretty good stuff in it. You can read some good writing from people you might not necessarily read in town. So it's a little bit more, cast in the mold of the 90s and 80s than it is in the 2020s, 2030s coming up, and so it's a little old-fashioned. We cling to that because it's not necessarily good one way or another to kind of chase trends, and we've seen some. When you're in the economic world, you have to chase trends because that's where the money is. If you're not ahead of the game, you're behind it. And look at what's happening to the Washington Post. I mean, or the Wall Street Journal, just right now eviscerating itself in order to capture basically the whimsical millennial market on the internet and all these other hot media, TikTok and X and all the other things that are out there that just go on and on, and they're cute, they're fun, and so the kids get into that and they stop paying attention to the kind of traditional journalism this is the problem that we have, and the advertisers are following where they think the kids are going to spend their bucks, and so it's a big complicated mess, really, in a business context that is. Hard to solve, and many very brilliant people are working to do that. And again, it's consolidating itself into certain power positions, guys like Bezos, big money, that are influencing the entire world, plus our community and our lives. And so it's a struggle, in my opinion, and it's not one that's going to be easily resolved.
Well, do you, so you don't follow, so you're saying the Ryder doesn't follow trends?
Correct.
Okay.
We are a trend. I mean, it's it's like, what's going on? What do you got? Oh, what's this? Well, somebody submits a story that we like, and it may be about something that I've never even heard of. It doesn't make any difference. It's somebody's following it. They care about it. It's worth reading. We'll publish it.
Well, Becky, I wonder if you could kind of touch on the editorial process of the Limestone Post. I know you're more of a curated writer topic kind of, you don't wait for somebody to submit an idea to you. Tell me how that works.
Well, I mean, we have right now assistant editor and marketing director, and Ron, who's the executive editor. And we have a certain number of topics that we like to deal with: environmental, social justice, health, science, arts, those kind of things. But we have a stable of freelancers who pitch an idea to us on occasion. And sometimes we reach out to writers and ask them to write about specific stories. So that's mostly the editorial process.
And these are, you pay writers?
Yes, we do. We pay for our freelance contributors.
Okay. All right. Maybe at this time, see if anyone has any questions from our audience or comments.
Yeah,
Bob?
I'll offer a couple of comments. Bob Salzberg, former HT. Now I work in the newsroom with Pat, WFIU and TIU. One of the other things that WFIU and TIU have every day is a newsletter. It goes out between 4 and 5 o'clock, so there are like 6 or 7 local stories that are sent to people's inbox every day. So that's just another part of the daily routine. And I think when Pat was going over numbers, it's really hard. I've had the ability to sit here and think about it for a minute. And I think there are like 17 people that work in the newsroom, counting
total
editors, videographers, reporters, managers. Joe Wren, of course, people know Joe from a long time. He does reporting, and he hosts the TV show that Pat's talking about. Sarah Whitmire's the news director there, included. Perry Metz and I are the editing team. Perry's volunteer. I get a little bit of money. So, I just wanted to sort of add to Pat's.
So, question to both of you. So that those are 17 professionals who are either as interns or up, but basically the professional staff is getting paid enough wage to live here. I mean, they're not, having to have side gigs in order to do the job.
Full-time professional staff.
Right, yeah. I think you were
tremendous.
talking about how, you're in journalism because you love it, not for what you're getting paid.
Well, yeah, I understand that. That's why I'm glad that that's a good thing that you're generating enough from your membership. And
Yeah,
I guess I have another question about that because I've dealt with you with WTIU and WFIU a lot, and in the past, I ran Upland Brewing Company for a while, and we were doing shows. We did a show with you guys, and it was pretty successful. But the distinction between advertising and sponsorship, can you explain that? I mean, can I ask that question? Because I can't go in and say, Upland's going to do this, and it's an ad for Upland. They say, no, you could sponsor. In other words, there's this. Can you explain that? Because I never did get it.
I don't know if I can. I don't know if I can explain that.
Yeah, I think.
Can you explain
Yeah.
it better than me?
Yeah,
I mean, as a
Limestone has those opportunities too, right?
Yeah, I mean, Limestone, because we're a 501c3, the IRS views, advertising revenue as earned revenue, so you'll be taxed for that. Sponsorship revenue comes from, it's basically where the company is saying, we support your mission, and we're on board to support this mission of this nonprofit organization, and that's the distinction. So if we allow a company to promote their company, then it's considered advertising revenue by the IRS. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, it's just, to me.
It's baffling, isn't
it's not that- no, I
it? You should
get
hear
it.
my treasurer speak.
I totally understand how the tax situation works.
Yeah.
The issue that I have is that you can't really tell the difference over the air. When the ad, it's just like, oh, that was an ad. That wasn't we support the mission. That was come by our, use our financial services, use our this or that. And I'm saying that to me, it's one of these, what do you want to call it? A little bit of a shaky zone where you can push the limits, but who's drawing those limits? And I understand how, but you're trying to get money, and the people who are sponsoring it are trying to get something in return. And my favorite, of course, is Bluestone Tree. I love Bluestone Tree. I love the company. We use them a lot because we have trees that are falling down all the time now. And they support Sycamore Land Trust, which we do, and that you want to be involved with them. And they are also selling their services. Buy our services. That's an ad. So, it's just like, yeah, we want it, and we're going to use it, but it's kind of like, at what point do you stop dividing the atom and draw the line in the sand? This is the red line. That's my question.
I think too that there's a big, sponsorships. People are, community businesses are saying too. They're looking at the public good, the public relations aspect of it, and that's part of that. I mean, if you say you support the mission of a news organization, that means you're supporting free speech, freedom of the press and those kind of things. And so saying that, so there's this goodwill public relations aspect to it too, that appeals to a lot of companies, to show that they're, participating in those things in their own community. So it is, you're absolutely right. It's a fine line. It's a slippery slope sometimes. But for us, we try to parse that line because my treasurer doesn't want to pay any money to the IRS. So we're pretty careful about it. Nobody does, right?
Yeah, and I would say from my days as a print editor, I was always coming into people that didn't understand the difference between an editorial column and an advertising column, because I would get comments about this story you had in the paper, and I'd ask a few more questions, and it turned out it was an ad for somebody.
I have a story, an interesting story in that regard. I was the editor of Equilibrium. Equilibrium was the House Journal for Zero Population Growth, and I was fired. And it hurt because these are people that I really admired and really respected, and they fired me because I refused to. Well, I asked them point blank, "Is population growth about sex?" And they said no. And I said, "I can't work here. I just can't do it, because how can you have 1.5 children? What happened to half of the kid? I mean, it's the statistical anomaly is just not. We made a cartoon out of it, and they got really upset. It's a family's walking down, they got a kid and a half a kid, which you can't have. But statistically, you can. And so there's this distinction that's made in my mind between the real world and the kind of abstract, what we want to call it, wishful world. And it was Shirley Temple Black that fired me. I mean, holy moly. I was sitting there saying, I worship you. And she said, well, you're fired. And I said, okay, we like you, Penn. You're a nice guy, but out. So anyway, I just wanted to say that those are the distinctions that are real life. And it's hard to be, I'm not trying to point myself as some sort of ethical torch. No, not. But I will say this, which I think is important. The successful magazines that I've worked on, and I've been several, are targeted. In other words, there are like trade associations, or they have a very specific audience, or they have a very specific relationship between the money and the reader. And it's not necessarily writing an editorial that promotes your advertiser. It's like it's a two-way street. They want the information. These people have the information. They're paying for the information and the theater of it, because some of these magazines are extraordinarily well done and related to other media, so that there's blogs and there's podcasts and there's conferences and there's videos and there's subsets, and we were working intensely for a while with high-end talk shows on cooking. So we had these books that I was producing. They were beautiful books, and Yan Can Cook and things like that, that were promotional elements that were being paid for in order to give them as premiums to subscribers. And they were supporting the stores or the shows. And we would break them up into chapters, and they would go to different restaurants around the country who would put their own menus and stuff in them, and I would print them in Hong Kong as a group. And I'd have 20 different publications with one basic, set of stories and graphics. And so you're just trying to work every angle. I mean, that's ultimately what happens a lot in journalism today.
Yeah, that's why I really feel kind of fortunate to work for public media, is that there's really no advertising pressure, to have that bottom line that you're bringing in this. The one thing that I think, as an editor, is when we're doing stories on businesses, sometimes, there's a fine line of being, I don't want to market this place, but if they've got an interesting story, then it becomes, a little news thing. So, but yeah, with public media, we don't have to worry about, the ads and working around them. But we do have people that, they still do send in emails, hey, can you do this for us as a business?
Pat, I wonder if you could talk a little bit about, you're an entity under the IU umbrella, and according to your last financial statement from fiscal 2022, you get $2.8 million in IU general fund support. And I assume some of this corporation and foundation report might be some of the IU foundation related things. What, now I know you're going to tell me you have no pressure from IU.
We have no pressure from IU.
Is that right?
I feel zero pressure from IU at all. Yeah,
Do you ever
it's-
feel, you know, we've worked, and I know we've worked for publishers, I work for publishers in other places, where even if they don't expressly say something, you know there's some topics you got to kind of walk on little cat feet to get around, like, you know, a publisher that's very chummy with the president of the Chamber of Commerce or something like that. And you know, well, before you do that story, you know, you're going to have to think long and hard about it. You ever have any of those discussions related to an IU-related story?
No, I have not. I feel like IU is very hands-off from what we do, and I really feel like almost to a fault that the people running this, you know, the radio and television service building separate themselves from us. I mean, I feel like we're really, the door in the newsroom feels like it's really cut off from the rest of the university and the people upstairs, and that's been really nice. I mean, like you talk about, I mean, the money does come in, the foundation, one of our, the biggest support we get, and then one of the big, you know, funders that we do have, Amy O'Shaughnessy, works for the foundation, but she works in our building. And she's bringing in, you know, all kinds of money and working to set up grants and other, you know, revenue, bringing in other revenues.
Is
Oh,
Bob?
I have a comment about that, and then I have a question, but I can wait till later on the question. But my comment about that is that I think the budget numbers that you read, I would assume that they're for WFIU and WTIU, but in total. And Pat and I work in the newsroom, which is one small piece of WFIU and TIU.
Well, that was going to be a follow-up question. How much of that $2.8 million is actually newsroom budget?
Yeah, fortunately, I don't get into budgeting anymore.
Yeah,
Yeah, but, I mean, it's a big station. Pat talked about the amount of time that the newsroom and the Pat's people spend putting out newscasts every day, but the station's on the air 24 hours, so the rest of that money is paying for the national All Things Considered, and the national morning edition, and the Fresh Air, and all the other, you know, Performance Today, and all those other programs, and all the other departments in the paper. We're one department, or in the station, we're one department. So you got to kind of separate the news departments of FIU and TIU from the rest of FIU and TIU when thinking about the money aspect.
yeah. WFIU has its own staff. You know, I mean, there's people manning the radio. You've got programs that, you know, David Brent Johnson comes in and does jazz. Brother Williams does his Friday, you know, show. And like I said, there's somebody, you know, running the board 24 hours a day.
Okay.
I have a question.
Certainly. Thank you.
Since IU doesn't interfere, have you ever criticized the hand that feeds you?
Yes.
For example?
I would think one.
Journalist.
Yeah, I would think one recently that probably was kind of when we kind of analyzed Pamela Witten's first year at IU, and there was some very critical things said about her from, you know, from people in the administration and, you know, and professors and things. So yeah,
And nobody came back to
nobody
bite you?
came back to bite us.
Okay.
I think Pam may have canceled her first appearance with us,
But
and came back a couple months later.
but isn't that also the fact that you were reporting what other people were saying? You weren't, as a group, criticizing her. You were reporting what other people who may have associations with you, but they were making those statements. Is that correct?
Yeah, one thing, I mean, that separates us from newspapers, we really don't have that editorial page type of thing where we're doing that. But I think, I mean, in journalism, you're letting people tell the stories and letting people take what they get out of that. I mean, you're going to give them both sides of each story and let them decide.
So this is a question actually for you, advocacy. it is a question. Is advocacy, how does that fit into the model, like for 501c3, you are not allowed to make direct political statements. So I created a 501c6 for a company because we did want to lobby. You cannot lobby if you're a 501c3, but you can accept gifts. So in your advocacy for even mental health or whatever, do you find a conflict there?
I think because if I'm going to write on mental health, I mean, the number one thing I'm going to do is not determine, the political sides of it. I want to look at what's happening in the community and talk to various voices in the community, mental health providers, government people, that kind of thing, so that I can provide a perspective for my reader about what's actually happening. I mean, we are considering right now and looking at the possibility of adding a local daily news site to our under our umbrella. If we do that, then the question becomes a little bit more succinct. I mean, then you have to ask yourself, are we going to accept political advertising, those kind of things? And those are things that we're reluctant to do at this point. Endorsing, same thing. But will we write on them? Yeah, I mean, we'll write on positions and what it means to the community and that thing. And I hope that answered your question.
And it actually poses another one, which is like if someone has a political ad, but you're not endorsing it,
No.
but you would accept the ad for the revenue if you accept advertising or not. Then would you be editorially declining that ad because of censorship of some sort?
First of all, we won't accept political advertising unless we had a policy that addresses that, and that gives us some consistency.
Right.
And that means too, if I have a policy, that means too that my board has made a decision to do that. If my board decides not to do that, we don't do that. I mean, because the board, it directs the organization for a nonprofit, and that's how it will work for us. And looking at my board now, my guess is we would not. I mean, to not put ourselves in that position to do that, either accepting political advertising or even endorsing. But we will present information about that political candidate or whatever as it pertains to what's happening in the community and what they're saying about the community and, that kind of thing. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, but I've got a question for Bob about this, if you don't mind. I just finished the editing and publishing book with Charlotte Zibel. And much of what we looked at here, in fact, we got the negatives from the old Herald Telephone and Herald Times as a gift to the museum. And we sat here at a table with those negatives and leafed through them, finding the materials that we could supporting the 1971 election, 72. And in there were endorsements, and that newspaper endorsements were really a big deal. And so my question really goes, because I can't answer it, it comes back to a historical situation that maybe reflects what's going on as well elsewhere. How did you handle that endorsement situation? I mean, was that a board decision? Was that a publisher decision? Was that an editorial? Did you guys get together and have a big food fight?
Well, I wasn't here in 1971, so I wasn't part of that endorsement process. But I was here from 85 to maybe 10 years. I was involved in the endorsement process until we stopped endorsing. In the endorsement process at that time, we interviewed candidates or went to forums. For the most, I'll tell you a forum story. I told it at the last panel, but so I'm not going to repeat it. But we would interview candidates. We'd bring in everybody running for office. We would do the interviews, and then the editorial board, which there were 3 of us or 4 of us, would make our choices. We would then run those choices by the publisher. the publisher of the newspaper, who for some time was the owner of the newspaper, agreed, signed off on our choices or wanted to discuss it further. And then he, it was always a man, would be involved in deciding we're going to stick with the editorial board decisions, or I, the publisher, am going to say, no, I really want you to reconsider this one, which happened a couple of times. So it was a board decision after people were interviewed. When we decided that that was too time-consuming and too difficult to do and too, it frankly just irritated too many people, we decided it wasn't worth the time and effort to do it. And it, in addition to that, perhaps that wasn't the way we wanted to use our editorial page. So.
Yeah, and I was on the editorial board for a while, not only at the Herald Times, at another newspaper in Evansville. And I can tell you, the Herald Times endorsement process was a lot more intensive. Where I worked before, you know, we didn't go out of our way to interview all the candidates, but we figured we knew them pretty well from daily coverage. But that was a very, very deliberate and thoughtful process. You had a question.
Yes. Did the editorial board endorse candidates from both major parties?
Yes. Yeah.
And once in Evansville, you mentioned about, we did get in a couple of big fights. It was, show you how old I am, Reagan and Carter. Yeah, and the newspaper in Evansville that I worked for, we ended up running 2 editorials. They're not necessarily endorsements, but kind of arguments for Reagan and arguments for Carter. So we did both of them.
I can also just say, I also remember endorsing Julie Roberts, who was running for county council as a Green Party candidate, because we did not like the Republican or the Democrat as well as we liked Julie in the interview process.
I think it's interesting. We're talking about what used to happen. I think now when you see in communities across the United States, you're seeing politicians not bothering to show up at forums or community forums. I mean, I'm with the League of Women Voters, sit on their leadership team, and last year we had numerous forums where only Democrats would show up and maybe one Republican would show up. And you're also seeing that question of endorsement is not coming up because the local news community is not strong enough, or it's not functioning like it should. And that is really one of the reasons that we're seeing, local news, the importance of local news being discussed.
Well, I'm sure Bob will back me up on this. It used to be you would get annual visits, at least from your congressman. You'd get one if your senator was in the area. He'd stop by and say hello. He'd meet with the editorial board, and that all went away.
Exactly.
I think Trey Hollingsworth, when he was in office, he met with us once, I think, and then he never came back.
Right. I mean, I grew up. My father was a circuit court judge for close to 45 years, and he campaigned. So I grew up in that community, that small 2,300 people community, and even that newspaper, endorsed and stuff like that. But it's gone now. So I mean, I find that and as a result, you're seeing politicians don't feel beholden to the community anymore. They don't feel like they have to, that they're, they don't have to respond to communities. They don't have to, answer your calls. They don't have to attend forums and stuff like that because you don't have an active.
And it's true, they really don't need us the way they used to because of the other ways they have to reach targeted groups of voters that they know will more likely to support them.
I guess this is the question for all of us. The difference between community and one's base. I was going to talk about that in a different context, but it behooves us to examine the fact that people will support the newspaper or the publication or the media that supports what they think is what they want to have supported. So it's a one-to-one relationship, and it's not reaching out to other sources. They don't want to hear it. There was an interesting, I was served on a committee that was analyzing and grading the papers for a foundation through IU in international studies. And one of these papers was a magnificent thing. I'm surprised it hasn't been published yet. We were doing it anonymously, of course, so I can't really talk about it. But he pointed out, this writer, that all of the Republicans, that the blob of Democrats were all over the place. They were listening, looking at all this media, going here, looking at me, have all this data for their ingestion of information. Quite diverse. Republicans was a really narrow little blob that they just went in and out, around. It didn't go out. Just did not go very far away from the backyard. That they thought that they were talking to everybody over their own fences, and it just formed a circular cycle.
And that touches on something I wanted to explore with you guys, and that's about as I know, as a retired person now, I try to be relatively well informed, and it can be exhausting because I've got to look so many different places. And like Bob mentioned, your daily digest you send out. I didn't know you could get one of those. I get one from AP and the New York Times and the Washington Post, but I found it harder to be that proactive with local sources. Like
You can sign up at WTIU.org, Rod.
well, yeah, because I'm here talking to you. How do all the people? I think we're have a concern that perhaps as consumers we get into silos, or might refer to it as a high school clique. Like the cool kids want to hang out at the Ryder, and real serious people want to go with Limestone Post, and the science nerds want to go to TIU. So how do we address that, and what are mechanisms where there can be a little more broader engagement with people, so that not necessarily, oh, you got to wait till I come to you to tell me that you can sign up for this.
I don't know. I think looking back, all of those were under the newspaper umbrella, before the internet and before all the different things. And us sitting up here, we kind of fill 3 different niches almost. We're kind of delivering more of the hard news daily. You've kind of taken over the entertainment, and you've got the that. So it's that.
Whatever that is.
Two bookends here.
2 bookends, right?
Investigative.
The investigative part of it. We still try to do that, but it's a lot of our stuff is more focused on kind of the daily thing. But yeah, I don't.
Like Pat, I was looking at your website today, and that Rush to Kill podcast, and I started reading about that, and I said, well, why didn't I know about this? It says here you've been working on it for months.
Because we've been working on it for years, actually. Yeah, it's been in the planning stages, and it's just now being produced. So that's when it's we're starting to make the push to push that out there. It'll be.
How important do you feel marketing of those kind of things outside of your own little silo is?
It's going to be very important. This should be something that goes out nationwide. The Rush to Kill podcast, because it's about all the federal executions in Terre Haute, and how they've had trouble doing those. And, I mean, there's a moratorium on them now with President Biden in charge, but if President Trump gets back in next, then they'll start, they'll resume the federal executions over there.
And as I was reading, that is something that was kind of a collaboration, Indiana Public Media, and there were some other
Yeah, it's really been spearheaded.
public radio journalists around the country.
Right. Yeah, it's really been spearheaded by George Hill, our reporter on the case. He and Adam Pinsker witnessed every federal execution that went down and under the Trump administration. Yeah, so there were 13 executions in a 6-month period, and they were over. As journalists, there's 3 or 4 journalists, excuse me, that they have in each time to witness that, and those guys saw all of them.
Yeah, and that's the type of thing when said I try to keep informed, but then I come across that and I go, well, where'd that come from? Or, what's this about a 40-foot signpost down at the end of North Walnut? And what do you mean the police station's for sale? I just feel like I'm just kind of staggered all the time about things I didn't know about.
I think if you don't have strong local news in a community, that's what happens. People go, well, where am I going to get my news? And so they go to social media. 69% of people think that disinformation and misinformation is a major societal problem. And yet, that's where people turn to. And you can go to the internet, and as a result, people will get a mixed amalgam of news. And you have to be able to discern what's critically credible and what's not. You have to be a critical thinker to do that. Plus, too, I mean, you have, once you lose that local news, you have this political polarizations. People go to their national party for news, too. I mean, the research shows that they go to the national party for news if you can't get it locally. I mean, and it's so true. All news is local, right? I mean, that's just the most critical thing, and that's what anchors a community, and I truly think that's what anchors a community and what makes a community is that you have thriving news sources. We're lucky here; we've got a variety of them, and my only concern is like what happens when the HD goes away, because Gannett will eventually do that because they don't support local news. So what do you do then? So that's really going to be a big question. I'm sorry.
Did you have a question?
Well, I had a comment. When it comes to marketing, have you considered, particularly for Pat here, have you considered going to the marketing department of the Kelley School of Business and asking them for an assignment as to have the kids come up with ideas as to how to market your programs? It works. I've done it at Ohio University. We were doing a total redo of a paper, and we took it to their graphics class, and the kids gave all sorts of ideas as to how to redo papers. And every time we did that, we came up with a couple of ideas that we actually used. So it gave them an interesting twist on how to get involved locally, and it gives you perhaps some good ideas as to how to market your product.
Yeah, we've got, we do have our own marketing department, that's part of the budget that Rod was talking about.
I didn't know
But
about this either. So.
Yeah, we do kind of jokingly, but not jokingly, say that, I don't know how many of the students actually know that there is an NPR and PBS station on campus, as much as we do try to push it out. We've got Joe's head on a bus driving around campus in the city. But yeah, it's marketing is a challenge for us to try to, get our names out there.
Well, I think in December that panel will kind of take up how do we do it better, and certainly I hope you guys come back then, and if nothing else, sit in the audience where Bob is, and you can ask him questions because he'll be moderating that one. And as you know, the
Did you know that?
Tonight,
Did you get the memo?
Yeah.
I'll be happy to.
You agreed to that like last May.
Oh,
Yeah, but as you know, the Herald Times, the bound editions, there was recently a sale of those to raise funds that will go into an account with the Community Foundation on local news, Community News Fund, where, and I'm sure all of you have plenty of things you would like to do with that idea. But I was going to say, if for some reason, what would you like to, what project would you like to do with a fund of that sort? Like if you could say, okay, here's, give us your idea for a collaborative project you want to do with either by yourself or with someone else in the community, like your deep dive. What would you use it for?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, we are exploring the feasibility and funding aspect of providing a daily digital local news paper under our umbrella. And so that means that we would look to the Community Foundation and ask them if they'd be willing to fund that. But we are also going to look to the American Journalism Project, Craig Newmart. We're looking at Inasmuch Foundation, Lilly Foundation, also to fund that. I mean, for nonprofits, most of our funding comes from grants and foundations, about 53%, depending on the type of organization it is, if it's a startup or a local, that kind of thing. So that's one of the things that we would look to the community to see if they would be willing to fund that. And we're lucky because the Community Foundation here has taken the initiative and to educate themselves about what's going on with local news here in this community. It's really, really admirable that they're doing that because a lot of community foundations are starting to do that throughout the United States, but it's new. It's a new process. It's a new undertaking, and it requires you to get up to speed with what's really happening nationally. So we're really lucky that they've done that, and they funded the deep dive thing based on that research that they had done. So we're really fortunate we have a community foundation like that. Do you?
Well, I was going to say, one of the big projects we're working on right now was funded by the Poynter Institute, which is kind of a big media group. And it's about the private equity, where private equity firms coming in, buying up local newspapers and gutting them down to what they are now. And it's a big project that Bob's part of. And, they funded it's, I think, 3 months it'll be through the end of November, and we'll have a very big web build on it that will go out nationally, and we'll be doing, things on TV and radio behind it.
We have publication target date of November 27th, starting that week. We have a community event on the 7th, well, it's actually, noon edition here, I believe.
On the
17th,
yeah.
to talk about the project.
Well, that'll be good for your panel in December. You'll have all this fresh information that you can build on. Okay. Any other questions, comments? Yes, ma'am.
Well, I agree with you about not knowing what's going on anymore just because everything's so spread out. I used to be a know-it-all, and now I have no clue about what's going on anywhere. And I think that if this community fund it should I'm looking for a curator, formerly known as a daily newspaper, that will just kind of whoosh, and I can go look at the Limestone Post and I can go do this and do that, like a newspaper used to do.
Well, my kind of idea that going along this, that I wish there was a portal I could go to.
Yeah.
Bloomington Community News, and I could go there and I could see Pat's Daily Digest, and I could see what the latest post from the Limestone Post, and I can see what's coming up in the Ryder, and how to get and with links out to all of those. And I don't know.
Like community activities and things like that are going on, it's just like,
Yeah.
oh, this is this weekend.
Yeah, and that was the one thing I miss. And when I was in the newspaper, and I was a news editor over there, I did my best to kill police beat and any kind of calendar listings, because it was just so labor intensive that we didn't get to do the in-depth reporting. And that's what all of the reporters wanted to do. They wanted to do the in-depth stuff, and we wanted to do it. But now, what I miss is, what's going on in town this weekend, or and that kind of routine kind of news that I hated doing as a journalist, and wish we didn't have to, but that's what I miss now.
Yeah, we were just talking in the newsroom about restaurant inspections the other day and how they've gone away. There used to be
Yeah, that was great fun. And I ran Upland Brewing Company. Did I tell you that?
Mhm.
Did we have fun with that? You bet. Oh boy. Also, well, I'm not going to even the stories. Yeah. So I wanted to follow up on what you had just said, and it went away. So I got remembering stories. But well, I'm going to let it go. I'll come back.
Okay, Ron, I don't know if this is a good time for this question since the panel's gone up in December, but I wanted to ask the three of them where in the news ecosystem they would see themselves. I mean, if all things worked out the way they would prefer, where would they see themselves in a Bloomington news ecosystem going forward?
Okay.
Here we go.
That's a very good question. Well, we are part of one. I mean, there is one that exists that we're all part of, and we're all relatively unhappy with it, which is typical of an ecosystem. But for example, calendar, that's what I was trying to remember.
Yeah.
That's a very big deal for the writer. And our problem is that we're the lead time. So the things that we can put on the calendar have to be planned so far in advance that they end up being in a very limited group. Music, film, some big IU lecture series coming up, or a big show thing that's going down the road that we can actually get in there and still be on relevant 5 days after the paper's gone on sale or where it's being distributed. And so that element of an ecosystem is very important. We don't like being so much on the very tail end of it. And we would like to work with people to get more of that information sooner if we could get it. And updates. Now, how do we do updates? We have an online presence. We have a flip book presence. You can get a PDFs and they flip through like a little magazine. It's a lot of fun. But we would love to be able to afford something in the middle of the week. You can update. Okay, what's really happening? Oh, that movie schedule's changed, but you don't have to go there to find it posted on the board that we're going to be in the room, next building over because somebody's having a lecture hearing. Okay, so that kind of thing, being more immediate, and having the ability to put that within our own context and relate it to others in a meaningful way.
Yeah, I'd like to think that we would be the ones taking up kind of the mantle of your daily local news in Bloomington, and I think that's what we try to do. We're able to provide that daily immediacy news coverage, on radio, on the web, and through social media things. So that's where I would like to see us being, and I think we like to think of ourselves as doing that now. That we are the news source in Bloomington now that the HT has kind of gone the way that it has. Our newsroom we're growing while a lot of them are shrinking. So we're constantly adding people and trying to find new ways to cover the news. We have a rural affairs reporter, we have an education reporter, an environmental reporter. So we try to cover the news.
Yeah, I'd love to see you guys expand that locally so that it has the same professionality as the national news, which it doesn't now, and it gets a little hokey because you're going from NPR to the local news, and generally you have intern people working on it and so on, which is good. It's just that you really feel the drop in terms of pointedness and the critical thinking, and that's just I think a problem of resources and focus.
Yeah, it's also kind of, I see coming from newspapers is that it's hard to shove a lot of news into a 40-second radio spot. and coming from news, from a newspaper, the biggest adjustment for me was, shrinking down that 35-inch story into something that, is equal to 10 inches, right, into a soundbite. But we do longer form journalism with, on Indiana News Desk with stories, and like I said, through the city limits and Noon Edition, we're trying to really cover the community.
I just wanted to share for you. You were saying that you wanted to know what was going on. We have an event calendar that's free to all the community organizations here. They put their events up, and you can check it anytime you want to find out what's happening this weekend.
The Limestone Post?
Yes, it's under the event calendar. But as for the ecosystem, I would like to see us, our plan would be to continue operating the magazine, providing that long form solutions journalism aspect alongside a digital newspaper that can explore issues of community and what's happening in the neighborhoods. That's one of the focuses that we're really going to explore in going that direction, providing that community news. And then also looking at government oversight, dedicating somebody who's actually, exploring those things, maybe a little bit more detail as a newspaper can. So as for that, that's what we're working towards. And magazine will continue, but we're working towards that digital newspaper format.
Following up with you, Pat, you now have 2 TV broadcasts. Indiana News Desk is on twice a week, Friday and Saturday.
It's once a week, but it's rerun on Saturdays. So it runs. The first showing is on Friday nights at 6.
Any plans to expand that to more nights a week?
No, not now. But we are looking at, having a Roku channel or something along that line where we're doing our features and putting them out rather than waiting.
Or one of your other digital.
Right,
channels.
or on some sort of digital platform where we're rather than waiting until Friday to put out, what news we've got, being able to put out stories nightly, hourly on it.
Okay. Any other questions or comments?
Oh, I have
Go ahead.
I have a general question. I guess it's all of us, because we think about this. The streaming aspect, as you said, Roku. Well, how many of them are there out there? And in and of themselves, there used to be 3 stations on TV. Remember that? And it made it easy. You didn't necessarily like them, and then there was the 4th, and then all of a sudden, there's the great joke. Letterman comes on and says, "Yeah, I get 2,000 channels at home." Well, it divides people into those particular. They're expensive. $6, $7, $12 added up. If you got 4 or 5 of these things, whoa, you're paying for cable. You're paying. There's just a lot of money that's being poured into essentially just the channels, the technology, not the information, and not the content that's in it. So Netflix has a real problem because it's just boring. Once you see the film, why are you going to watch 8,500, idiotic films? No, you don't. And it's so the question is, how do we do that and not run the risk of just channeling it small, boring, in terms of bore of a rifle? Instead of going being a big cannon, you're now down to a BB gun or a 22. Is that effective?
I know. I mean, you're only producing the content once, but if you can shove it out on 45 different platforms, Indiana News Desk is on YouTube, so if you type in Indiana News Desk, it'll pop up there, and you can get it. So I think that's there is so many different places to try to find content, but like I said, you only have to produce it once. You just have to get it out to multiple places.
I kind of like the idea too, and since Bloomington, 80,000 people, but we're like a small community. It's got that mentality. So I like the idea of collaborating with the different news. I mean, we would love to collaborate with you guys and work together to provide and try to meet all those different areas of news that we could provide the community. And I think really you can only do that through collaboration and being open to that. And I mean, the deep dive series that we did with WFHB was just is a great example of collaboration of how you can provide that. I mean, you probably provided it digital print and also on the radio. I mean, and that's incredible to me, that collaboration, because of the kind of information that you could share. So I think that if we could all collaborate and look for projects that we can work together on, I think it would be really exciting.
Yeah, that allows you to cover much more territory with fewer people.
More depth too.
So if I were to look at this practically, which I think is a great idea, it would work for us almost like an advertisement for something coming up, because we're so far ahead of you in terms of time. So say you have a deep dive. There's kind of like an excerpt or a synopsis, the way you would do it in an academic journal. Mm-hmm. We'd say, okay, well, this is coming up, pay attention to it. It's going to be, and this is, in other words, the key points of this essay, of whatever the deep dive is, which would actually work like an ad. In other words, there would be, here are the things to look at from the other magazines, the other media that are coming up that we think are really going to be worth pausing your day to take a look at. That's how we would do it, I think, because there's, does that make sense to you?
I call it cross promotion versus ads. But it doesn't sound as bad as an advertisement.
For me, it's more about actually sitting down together and saying, okay, how can we get information about this particular issue out to people, and how can we do it in both of our platforms, working together to do that. That's kind of what I'm thinking. And that's how we did it with the deep dive series. They had they took our ideas that came out in the articles and they expanded it and talked to different people and stuff and shared that different kind of information. So we were basically just addressing an issue like opioid settlement monies, what's going to happen with those, and addressing it like in several different facets. And people got that information, and then they can make up their own mind about what they think is happening. So that's what I was thinking.
Okay, gotcha.
Yes. Way in the back.
Thank you. Gabby Kriebel, I work here. Pat, you were saying that, your newsroom's kind of an anomaly in that it's growing. And I feel like I've noticed amongst my friends, I'm in my late 20s, like more of an interest in broadcast journalism, more, I've seen a lot of young people involved at like WFHB, for example. And I was wondering, one, if that kind of growth in broadcast journalism is like a national trend or more of a local thing that you're seeing, and then two, like why maybe you think there's more interest across the board Or do you not agree?
No, I definitely see more of that, and I think with us, we've got the IU Media School is really helpful. I mean, to pull talent from, it's another avenue for them to get their work out in a professional setting. For them, and I think the younger generation is just getting more involved. I mean, the times are what they are, and I think they want to have more of a voice in that. So yeah, but I think, I mean, like I said, we've got 4 news interns, videographer intern, and and they provide a lot of the work that we do, and are excited about doing it. And like I said, I think it could just be a sign of the times that people want to be more involved. They want to have a say in what's happening rather than people our age dictating to them what how things should be.
Yeah, and just saying, if you're a young person and you're thinking about getting into news or public affairs or that sort of thing, you're certainly not going to go into print. You're not going to concentrate on that. You're going to go into more of a broadcasting type, avenue, because that's
right. The
that's
platforms that we
got.
use, everything is distributed through social media, and the youth is much more.
Unless you're a social media influencer and have a podcast, well, everybody wants a podcast.
I will say this, in the nonprofit area, what's really been interesting is that you're seeing news organizations kind of like focusing on certain issues. For instance, Block City in Chicago, they focus on neighborhoods only, what's happening in neighborhoods. The Trace also focuses only on gun control issues. So you're seeing some of that happening too, and that's all print or digital. So it's very interesting watching what's happening in the nonprofit sector for these news organizations too. So you're seeing different stuff.
Yeah, I was just going to add, you brought up podcasts, and I think we're kind of in a podcast generation.
Yeah.
And I think so. Public radio tells really interesting stories, and a lot of them turn into podcasts. And a lot of what we do winds up being a podcast. And they're not thinking of his name now, but there's a guy that does a statewide podcast, basically out of WFIU. Noon Edition, our show, is you can get a podcast of it. You can listen to it as the weeks go on. So I think that's a lot of the appeal.
And do you have a good way of comparing the listenership of like live radio versus the podcast version, and like what those statistics are? 'Cause I'm so curious.
Yeah.
Radio really is like kind of unique up here in that like it's for the live broadcast, it's like you listen to what's on. Whereas like all of the other ones, it's printed. Obviously you have like version posted online that you can listen to, or read. But if you're gonna listen to the radio and you're in your car, you're listening to the story that's playing,
Yeah, I think exactly that. I mean, you're getting whatever's on the radio when you hit it. Everything we do is archived, and it's embedded into the web version of the story. We'll have the audio version with it, and you can access, like Bob said, the noon editions are on our website and on various podcast sites. So,
do you think that more people are consuming it on demand than live?
I would think so. I certainly do. I mean, I'm sure most everybody. Your broadcast, like broadcast TV, is hard to do. I mean, you're going and finding streaming services that have the series on them. So, yeah, I would think that would go. I don't have any numbers or I haven't seen anything specifically, but just based on how I consume things, I would say that that's true.
One other comment I guess I want to make, and that is that I'm not sure that the solution to local news is going to come from all of us deciding what we want to do to present local news. It's going to come from the consumers. What do they want? And how do they want it delivered to them? And then we're going to have to, I think we're all going to have to figure out a model that fills the need that the news consumers tell us they have. I mean, we heard from a couple people in here today want more, go and do information. What's going on in the community? Where can I find it? How can I find it? Maybe it's there already, but people don't know where to go to look for it. So how do we solve the problems of the news consumers that say there's a problem? And it's going to be listening to what their problems are and then coming up with solutions for them, I think.
Which you'll explore further in December.
Yes, I guess so.
Okay.
I'll have questions.
Okay, is there anything else? Maybe some parting comments from our panel?
Well, I guess one of the things that we care about, and certainly I care about, is good writing. So good writing is good thinking. Good thinking makes good business makes a good community. Good logic helps cement people together because it's reasonable. It's not, shall we say, didactic. And opening up the process of thinking and examining is very much a humanism, a humanizing element. And that's what we care about a lot. We care about good writing. And it doesn't necessarily mean classic good writing. It just means good thinking put into words so that it really sticks on the page and it's not a bluster or a mood or some sort of hip thing that is here and gone. It sticks. And that's something that we try to do and try to encourage without paying for it.
I think I was thinking back about what Bob was talking about. Where do you get your news and what is it? And I like to think that, I don't know, we should be the trusted source of the news. I mean, that's the biggest thing when people are getting their news from anybody on the website. Anybody can create a blog, anybody can do this. But I think being a trusted source of the news is really important, and I think that's what we try to do. And like I said earlier, we're trying to be the news source for Bloomington to make sense of what's happening in the community, share what's going on in the community, and just providing stories from the community. And I think that's what we try to do.
I totally agree with you, Bob, that if you can't, from a non-profit standpoint, talking to the community is vital. And I can say that because ever since I've started working with Limestone Media, we've been doing that. We've been meeting with people in the community and talking to business leaders, community leaders, nonprofit leaders, whatever. We've been meeting with people and they're telling us, what they're interested in and stuff. But you can't provide news if you don't know what people want and what they find important for their community, what they think should happen to make your community function better. So I totally agree with you. You're absolutely right. You have to talk to people and you have to find out what it is they want in order to do what your job is. So.
Okay. I want to thank Pat and Becky and Penn for their time today and thoughtful comments, and for everyone there are few of you, but they all asked good questions, so that was great. So thank you very much.
Yes. And I will say, on behalf of the History Center, thank you so much for joining us. If you cannot wait for more newspaper history programs until December, we do have more that are happening. Upcoming this Friday will be a workshop with the IU School of Art, Architecture, and Design with their letterpress shop. So you get to set your own type, make a poster, take it home, and get your fingertips dirty.
And where is that going to be?
That's going to be at the IU campus. We can't move the presses here, sadly. But tickets are available on our website. We'll be doing that this coming Friday, October 13th, as well as November 11th. So.
Okay, and I always plug our annual open house the evening after Thanksgiving, before the Canopy of Light ceremony. There is, Andrea coordinates all this, and she has music and snacks and
And we'll be
hot,
doing printing on the Washington press
yeah,
too.
I'll be cranking up the Washington Press, and making some holiday themed